The Dreaming Grove Part 1. The whispers of the wind in a land far from the hustle of cities and the weight of history. There was a small, secluded grove where the trees whispered secrets to the wind. The people who lived near the grove believed it was a place of magic, though few dared to venture too deep into its depths. At the edge of the grove, surrounded by tall, ancient trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, stood a village, place where the earth was rich with life, where every person had their own story, and where every story was connected to the land. The people of the village believed in the stories of the grove, but they never spoke much about them. The elders told tales of the dreaming tree, a tree so ancient that its roots stretched deep into the earth and its branches reached far into the heavens. It was said that the tree had the power to show the future, but only to those who were truly ready to see it. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, a young girl named Elara sat at the edge of the village, gazing out toward the grove. She had heard the stories, but they never quite felt real to her until tonight. Tonight, something felt different. The wind was carrying a whisperer voice, calling to her. The sound was faint, but it was there. She stood up, her heart beating faster as she stepped toward the grove. The trees seemed to sway in unison, as if they were welcoming her, guiding her forward. With each step, the whisper grew louder, clearer, until it felt like the very air itself was speaking to her. Part 2. The entrance to the Dreaming Grove. The path through the grove was narrow, overgrown with vines and soft moss that cushioned her footsteps. The trees towered above her, their leaves rustling in a way that felt almost alive, like they were breathing with her. Elara felt both a sense of awe and a strange sense of belonging. She had never been this far into the grove before, but now, it seemed as though something was calling hers, something familiar, something she couldn't quite explain. The wind was still whispering, urging her forward. As she walked deeper into the grove, she noticed something strange. The air was thicker here, and the light that filtered through the canopy of leaves seemed to shimmer with an ethereal glow. It was as if the grove itself was alive with magic, a magic that was ancient and mysterious at the heart of the grove. Hidden among the tallest trees stood the dreaming tree. Its bark was a rich, dark brown, streaked with veins of silver that seemed to pulse with light. Its branches stretched wide, cradling the sky, and its roots twisted deep into the earth, as if it were anchored to both the heavens and the ground below. Elara stood before it, her heart racing. She felt an overwhelming sense of peace, but also a deep yearning to understand. The tree was more than just a tree, was a gateway. She could feel it in her bones, in her very soul. The whispering wind grew louder, and Elara closed her eyes, allowing the wind to carry her thoughts. The trees around her seemed to hum, their voices merging into a single, harmonious song. Part 3. The Dreaming As. Elara stood before the dreaming tree. The world around her seemed to blur, the colors of the grove shifting into soft hues of gold and blue. She felt herself being pulled closer to the tree, as if the very air was drawing her in. And then, with a sudden rush, everything went still. A bright light enveloped her, and she felt as if she were falling, drifting through space and time. She could hear the whispers, but now they were clear, the voices of the trees, the wind, the earth, all speaking to her at once. They were showing her something, visions of places and people, of lands far beyond her village. She saw a vast forest, similar to the grove but wilder, more untamed. In this forest there were creatures made of light and shadow, creatures that moved between worlds. She saw a river, its waters flowing in a way that defied logic, winding through the trees and stretching far beyond the horizon. But then she saw something else, something dark, a shadow creeping across the land, a force that seemed to drain the life from the trees, from the earth itself. It was a blight, a sickness that spread like fire, consuming everything in its path. The whispering voices grew louder, their message clearer now. The land is changing, they said. The balance is shifting. The future depends on you, Elara. The dreaming tree has chosen you to restore the balance. You must go beyond the grove, beyond the village, and find the source of the shadow. The visions faded, and Elara found herself standing beneath the dreaming tree once more, the wind still whispering in her ears. She took a deep breath, her heart racing with the weight of the task before her. The world had changed, and now her journey was beginning. Part 4. The Path Ahead. Elara walked back toward the village. The weight of her newfound purpose hung heavy in her heart. The grove, the dreaming triad, had shown her a glimpse of the future. A future where the balance between light and shadow would be tested, and it had shown her that she was the one who must face that challenge. The village was still the same, peaceful and unaware of the danger that loomed just beyond the horizon. But Elara knew that time was running out. She had to prepare, to gather those who would help her, and to set out on the journey ahead. The whispering wind had already carried her message to the farthest corners of the land. The future was waiting, and Elara was ready to embrace it. Part 2. The Call Beyond the Village. The decision to leave. The wind whispered through the trees as Elara stood at the edge of the grove, the first rays of dawn breaking through the branches. She had spent the night thinking, her heart heavy with the weight of what she had learned. The dreaming tree had shown her the future, or at least a glimpse of it, and she knew what she had to do. The village was quiet this morning, the usual sounds of birds chirping and people waking up, muted by the uncertainty that lay ahead. Elara knew the village would be safe for now, but something in her bones told her that this peace was fragile. The land was calling her, urging her to act before the shadow from the vision could spread. But leaving the village was not an easy choice. Her family, her friends, everyone she knew had lived in peace for generations, relying on the grove to sustain them. Stepping into the unknown would mean leaving behind everything she had ever known, and no one would understand. Yet the weight of the future pressed on her, urging her to follow the path that had been laid before her. She turned toward the village and took a deep breath. This was her destiny, but she was not alone. As the chosen one of the dreaming tree, she would find others who were meant to walk this path with her, and together they would uncover the truth hidden in the shadows. Gathering Elara made her way to the center of the village, where the fire pit burned low, and the villagers were beginning to gather for the morning meal. She had spent the night thinking about her journey, and now it was time to share what she had learned with those who could help her. There were a few who had always been curious about the land beyond the village, those who had dreamed of exploring the unknown. Among them was Joran, a young man with a keen sense of adventure and a knack for reading the land. He had always believed that the village's peace came at a cost, that there was more to the world than they had been taught. Elara Joran greeted her as she approached. "I can see it in your eyes. You've seen something, haven't you?" Elara nodded, her heart racing as she prepared to tell him everything. "I have. The dreaming tree showed me a future where the land is taken over by a shadow, and only those who remember the old ways can stop it." Joran's eyes widened in disbelief. But then a spark of understanding passed through him. He had always known that there was something beyond the village, something more. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady. "We'll need more than just us to face what's coming. If you're leaving, I'm coming with you." Elara smiled, grateful for his support. "Thank you, Joran. I knew you'd understand." They were joined by Arya, a skilled healer who had long been connected to the magic of the grove. Araya's knowledge of plants and the earth would be invaluable in their journey. She had always felt the pulse of the land deeply, and Elara knew that Araya's connection would help guide them. "I will go," Arya said quietly, as though she had already known this moment would come. "The land speaks to me, and it calls us to act." With their small group formed, Elara felt the weight of their decisions settle into her heart. They would leave the safety of the village, but they would do it together. The path ahead would be long and uncertain, but they had the strength of their connection to the land, to each other, and to the future they had seen. The journey begins. The day had arrived. Elara stood at the edge of the village, Joran and Arya by her side. The village behind them, with its thatched huts and familiar faces, seemed so far away already. The horizon stretched before them, an endless expanse of unknown. "We won't be back for a while," Elara said, her voice steady. "We'll face dangers, we'll face challenges, but we have each other." "We will," Joran replied, his hand resting on his sword. "And we'll protect this village, even if it means venturing into the unknown." Arya nodded. "The land will guide us. We will find the answers we seek, but we must remember that it is not just about saving the future, it's about understanding the land, its past, and the balance it requires." The three of them turned, stepping forward into the forest, the trees guiding their way as the path ahead unfolded before them. With each step, Elara could feel the call of the land growing stronger. It was as if the trees, the wind, the very earth beneath them were alive with anticipation. They walked for hours, crossing rivers and climbing hills, until the forest began, too thin, and the land opened up before them. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the land. Elara could sense that they were drawing closer to something, a place that held the answers they sought. They reached a clearing, and in the distance, they saw an ancient ruin, half buried in the earth, overgrown with vines and moss. It was a place of deep history, a place that had long been forgotten. "This is it," Elara whispered, her heart pounding. "The answers we seek are here." They approached the ruin carefully, knowing that whatever they found would lead them deeper into the mysteries of the world. The wind picked up around them, carrying the whispers of the past, urging them forward. The mystery unfolds as they stepped closer to the ruin. The air grew thick with magic. The stones beneath their feet seemed to hum with an ancient energy, and Elara could feel the land calling to them, urging them to discover the truth. She reached out, touching one of the stones. The moment her fingers made contact, the ground trembled beneath them, and a light flashed from the stones, illuminating the clearing. The wind grew louder, and Elara heard the whispers once more, clearer this time. "The shadow is closer than you think. The past must be remembered before it can be undone." A door, hidden in the side of the ruin, creaked open. The path ahead was dark, but the light from the glowing stones guided them forward. The answers they had sought were within reach, and the journey into the past, to the heart of the land itself, had just begun. Chapter 3. The Hidden Path. The door to the unknown. The ancient ruin stood before them, half hidden in the dense forest, its stones worn and weathered by time. Ilara's heart raced as she approached the hidden door, the faint glow from the stones still illuminating their path. The air around them was thick with magic, and a quiet tension hung in the air, as if the very ground beneath them was waiting for something to happen. "I can feel it," Elara whispered, her fingers brushing the cool surface of the stone door. "This place, it's alive." Joran stepped forward, his eyes scanning the structure. "It's not just the land that's alive here. There's something beneath all this, something older, more powerful." Arya nodded, her expression solemn. "The wind carries something. It's a warning." Elara took a deep breath and stepped closer to the door. The whispers of the wind grew louder, swirling around them as though they were being invited in, or perhaps being tested. Without another word, she pressed her hand against the stone, and the door creaked open with a slow, groaning sound, revealing a dark passageway beyond. The descent into darkness, the air inside the ruin was cool and musty, filled with the scent of earth and age. As they stepped inside, their footsteps echoed softly in the cavernous space. The walls were lined with ancient carvings, symbols that Elara couldn't yet understand. The further they ventured, the darker it became. Arya lit a small lantern, casting flickering shadows against the stone walls. "This place has been forgotten for centuries." Joran murmured, his voice hushed, as though the ruin demanded reverence. "I don't think it was meant to be forgotten," Elara said, her gaze fixed on the carvings. "These symbols, they're part of something much larger. This ruin wasn't just a shelter, it was a temple, a place of great significance." They moved deeper into the ruin, the air growing colder, and the space narrower. Elara could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, but there was something else, an eerie sense of foreboding, as if the ruin itself was watching them, waiting for them to uncover its secrets. At the end of the passage, they reached a large chamber. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, its surface smooth and untouched by time. Resting atop the pedestal was a small crystal glowing with an inner light, its surface shifting with subtle patterns. Elara felt a pull toward it, as though the crystal was calling to her. "I think this is it," Elara said softly, her voice filled with awe. "The source of the magic we've been searching for." The crystal's secret. Elara reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the cool surface of the crystal. The moment her skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through her, a flood of visions and emotions crashing into her mind. She saw flashes of the past, the village before the fog, the land thriving in harmony, and then the darkness, a shadow spreading across the land, slowly consuming everything in its path. The trees, the rivers, the very earth itself withering as the shadow grew larger. But there were other figures standing tall, their hands raised in defiance, fighting the shadow, trying to protect the balance. Then, as quickly as the visions had come, they faded, leaving Elara breathless and disoriented. The crystal dimmed, and she pulled her hand away, her heart pounding. "What did you see?" Joran asked, his voice filled with concern. "The shadow," Elara said, still reeling from the vision. "It's real, it's coming, and it's worse than we thought. The crystal, it's connected to the balance of the land. The land's energy is tied to the crystal, but the shadow is draining it." Arya stepped forward, her eyes wide. "If the crystal is what holds the land's magic, then it must be protected. If the shadow reaches it, the land will be lost." Elara finished for her, the weight of the truth sinking in. "We have to find a way to stop it." A hidden force. As they stood in the chamber, the air seemed to shift once more, and Elara felt the presence of something else, something hidden, something ancient. It was as if the walls of the ruin were breathing with a life of their own, pulsing with an energy that Elara could not fully understand. "The land is speaking to us," Elara said softly. "We need to find out what's causing this disturbance. We have the crystal, but it's only part of the answer." Joran looked at the crystal, then back at Elara. "So, what's our next step?" Elara's mind raced. The path was clear somehow. The crystal had connected her to the land, showing her that the balance was already fragile. But she needed more answers, more clues about where the shadow had come from and how to stop it. "I think the key lies deeper within the grove," Elara said, determination filling her voice. "The dreaming tree. It's not just a tree. It's part of the land's magic, and it may hold the answers we need." The path forward with the crystal in hand, Joran and Arya knew their journey was just beginning. The ruins had revealed only part of the mystery. The land was calling them forward, urging them to uncover the truth behind the shadow. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had to act before the darkness consumed everything. As they left the chamber, the crystal's faint glow lit their way, its energy now resonating with their own determination. The grove awaited them, its secrets buried deep within the earth. But Elara felt ready. With the crystal and the knowledge she had gained, she was no longer just a witness to the land's magic. She was its protector, its voice, and the shadow. They would face it head-on, together. Chapter 4. The Heart of the Grove, the Deepening Mystery. As Elara, Joran, and Arya made their way deeper into the grove, the air grew thicker with magic. The forest felt more alive, the trees taller, the shadows deeper, as though the very land was watching them. The crystal, now glowing softly in Elara's hands, seemed to hum with energy, pulsing with an ancient rhythm. The path before them twisted and turned, and the further they went, the less familiar the forest became. The trees grew closer together, their branches intertwining in a tangled web, and the ground beneath their feet became softer, more treacherous. "This place is different," Joran remarked, his eyes scanning the darkened forest. "The deeper we go, the more I feel like we're not supposed to be here." Arya, walking slightly ahead, glanced back at him. "This land is ancient. It's not just a forest. It's alive in a way that we can't fully understand. The shadow we've seen in our dreams, the one that's spreading, it's connected to this grove." Elara nodded, her grip on the crystal tightening. She could feel its energy vibrating, its connection to the land growing stronger. It was calling to her, urging her forward, deeper into the grove. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound being the rustle of leaves beneath their feet and the soft hum of the crystal. But soon they reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a large stone altar, ancient and weathered by time. The air around it crackled with energy, and Elara felt an overwhelming pull to approach it. The altar of secret Elara approached. The altar cautiously, the glow of the crystal illuminating the area. The stone was covered in symbols similar to those they had seen in the Ruina, mix of intricate carvings, runes, and shapes that seemed to move, shifting like liquid light. "This is it," Elara whispered. "This is where the answers are." Joran stepped forward, examining the altar closely. "What do you think these symbols mean?" Arya knelt beside the altar, her fingers lightly brushing the carvings. "These markings, they're not just magical. They are a language, a binding spell. This altar is a gateway, a place where the past and future intersect." Elara stepped forward, the crystal still glowing brightly in her hand. As she approached the altar, the crystal's glow intensified, casting a brilliant light across the symbols. The moment the crystal touched the surface of the altar, the ground trembled beneath them. Suddenly, a deep, resonating voice filled the air, its tone low and ancient, as though it came from the very heart of the earth. The balance is broken. The shadow spreads, and the land cries for help. Only the chosen can restore what was lost. The key lies within the heart of the grove, where the light and dark converge. Seek the ancient roots, for they hold the answer. Elara felt a surge of energy pass through her, the crystal glowing brightly in her hand. The voice faded, leaving an eerie silence behind. What was that? Joran asked, his voice trembling. The land spoke, Elara said, her heart racing. It's calling us to the heart of the grove. The roots, they hold the answer. Arya stood up, her eyes filled with understanding. The heart of the grove, that's where the shadow began. We need to go there, find the ancient roots. It's the only way we can stop the darkness. The path to the heart, without another word, Elara led the way, her steps steady despite the uncertainty that swirled in her chest. The grove seemed to open up before them, the trees parting to reveal a narrow path that led deeper into the forest. The air grew heavier as they walked, the magic of the grove pressing in on them, guiding them forward. The deeper they went, the more the land seemed to come alive around them. The trees whispered, their leaves rustling with secrets. The wind carried faint voices, as if the forest itself was speaking. But the words were unclear. As they walked, the shadows grew longer, and the light from the crystal began to fade. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, and Elara felt the weight of the journey pressing down on her. The closer they got to the heart of the grove, the more she could feel the darkness creeping closer. I don't like this, Joran said, his voice barely a whisper. It's like the land is alive, but it's suffocating us. The land is trying to show us the way, Elara replied, her voice steady. But the shadow is getting stronger. We need to keep going. The trees around them began to thin. And soon, they found themselves standing before a massive root system that stretched out from the earth like a great gnarled serpent. The roots twisted and turned, disappearing into the ground. But there was something different about them, something alive. This is it, Elara said, her heart pounding in her chest. The heart of the grove. She stepped forward, the crystal still glowing softly in her hands. The moment she touched one of the roots, a flash of light burst from the earth, and the ground trembled beneath them. The convergence of light and shadow, the roots began to glow with a soft, pulsating light, and Elara could feel the energy surging. Beneath her feet, the shadow, though distant, seemed to stir, as if it were aware of their presence. The air around them grew thick, charged with magic and uncertainty. A figure appeared before them, emerging from the roots, a tall, ethereal being, its form made of light and shadow, a fusion of both elements. It was neither entirely one nor the other, but something in between. You have come, the figure spoke, its voice both soothing and unsettling. The time of reckoning is upon us. The shadow has broken the balance, and now you must restore it. But be warned, the path ahead will test your strength, your resolve, and your understanding of the light and dark within you. Elara took a deep breath, her heart racing with the weight of the figure's words. We're ready, she said, her voice strong. The figure nodded. The roots hold the power to restore the balance, but only if you can unlock their secret. You must embrace both the light and the dark. Only then can you defeat the shadow. The figure extended its hand toward her, the air crackling with energy. The journey continues, Elara, but remember, what lies ahead will not be easy. Chapter 5: The Trials of Light and Shadow. The heart of the grove's secret there around Elara, and her companions hummed with tension as they stood before the ethereal figure emerging from the roots of the ancient tree. The figure, a fusion of both light and shadow, seemed to embody the very essence of the grove itself, creature of magic and mystery, a reflection of the world that Elara and the others had yet to fully understand. "You must choose," the figure said, its voice echoing in the hearts of the three adventurers. "The shadow grows, and the balance of the world is in your hands. You must embrace both the light and the dark within you if you are to restore what has been lost." Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. The figure's words were heavy with meaning, but she could not yet grasp the full weight of them. The grove, the crystal, the shadow, all of it seemed to converge in this moment. "What do you mean?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. "How do we embrace both light and dark?" "The shadow, it threatens everything." The figure's eyes glowed with a soft, reassuring light. "The shadow is not inherently evil. It is a part of the world, just as the light is. One cannot exist without the other. To restore balance, you must learn to accept both the darkness and the light within you. Only then can you heal the land." The trials begin. The figure extended its hand, and in an instant, the ground beneath Elara and her companions shifted. The air thickened, and the shadows in the grove deepened, swallowing the light. Before them appeared two paths. One was bathed in bright light, a golden road that seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. The other was cloaked in darkness, the path barely visible, a void that beckoned with an unsettling force. "Choose your path," the figure intoned. "The path of light will test your resolve, your purity, and your strength. The path of darkness will test your courage, your fears, and your willingness to embrace the unknown." Elara stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. Both paths seemed daunting. The path of light promised clarity, but the path of darkness seemed to hold the truth she sought. The balance between the two was key, but how could she choose? Stepped forward, his expression determined. "We don't know what either path holds, but we must choose. The village, the land, everything depends on us." Arya, standing beside him, nodded. "We must trust the land, trust ourselves." Elara took a deep breath. She knew that whatever choice they made, it would shape their journey and their future. She looked from the path of light to the path of shadow and made her decision. "The path of light," she said firmly. "We must start there." Joran and Arya exchanged a glance, then followed her lead. The light before them shimmered, a golden thread leading them forward. But as they stepped onto the path, Elara could feel the pull of the darkness just behind them. The path of light, the journey on the path of light, was not as easy as it seemed. The golden road stretched before them, but with every step they took, the light grew brighter and more blinding. The air was heavy with expectations, with a sense of purity that threatened to overwhelm them as they walked. The shadows of their past began to manifest around them, memories, regrets, doubts. Elara saw herself as a child, running through the village with laughter in her heart. Then she saw her parents, their faces filled with worry as they sent her off on her journey. She saw the village, her home, her family, and the peace they had once shared. But as the light grew brighter, these memories turned darker. She saw herself faltering, questioning her worth. She saw the fear in her eyes, the doubt that she could truly save the village. She saw the shadow growing, stretching out, a darkness that could not be escaped. Joran stumbled beside her. This is a test. The light shows us our fears, our weaknesses. Arya stopped for a moment, her expression filled with pain. The light forces us to confront what we've tried to forget. It makes us face the darkness within ourselves. Elara nodded, understanding. The light does not just show us what we want to see. It forces us to confront the truth that the path to balance is not easy. We must face our own shadows before we can defeat the one outside. They continued, their steps growing heavier. As the light seemed to press in on them, the air thick with the weight of their fears. The path of shadow finally, after what felt like an eternity, the path of light opened up, and the road before them became less blinding. But in the distance, the path of shadow called to them, darker and more enticing. The pull of the darkness was undeniable, and Elara knew they could not avoid it. "We must go on," Elara said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "We have to understand the shadow to truly restore the balance." They stepped onto the path of shadow, and immediately the air grew cold, the darkness thickening around them. The wind whispered, carrying with it the sound of ancient voices, the echoes of a time long past. The path was winding, and the ground beneath them shifted, making each step uncertain. But as they walked, Elara felt something stir within her. The shadow was not just a force of destruction, it was a force of understanding, a mirror that reflected the parts of herself and the land that had been buried. The shadow held the wisdom of ages, but it also held the key to the path forward. "I can feel it," Elara whispered, her voice barely audible in the thick air. "The shadow is not evil. It is a part of us, a part of everything." Voice echoed in the silence. "It is not the shadow itself that is dangerous. It is when we reject it, when we refuse to accept that it is a part of the balance, that it becomes a threat." Arya nodded. To understand the light, we must understand the shadow. As they ventured deeper, the shadow revealed more of its secrets, showing them that true power did not come from avoiding the darkness, but from embracing it. They would have to wield both the light and the shadow together if they were to restore the balance. The convergence at the end of the path. They found themselves at a crossroads, both light and shadow converging before them. Elara knew what they had to do: unite both forces, use them together to restore what had been lost. The shadow and the light were not enemies. They were two halves of the same whole. The figure from the heart of the grove reappeared before them, its form now a balance of light and shadow, its presence calm and powerful. "You have passed the trials," the figure said. "You have faced the truth within yourselves. The balance is now yours to restore. You are the keepers of both light and shadow." Elara stepped forward, the crystal still glowing in her hands, its light pulsing in rhythm with the energy of the land. "We are ready," she said. "We will restore the balance." Chapter 6. The trial of the ancients. The path to the heart of the darkness. Elara stood at the edge of the clearing, the crystal still glowing softly in her hands. The world around her felt still, yet charged with an undeniable energy. The trials they had faced so far had taught her much, but the path ahead was far from certain. The light and the shadow had shown their strength, but now they had to be combined, harnessed to defeat the growing darkness. The grove stretched out before them, its trees dense and ancient. But the deeper they went, the more Elara felt the land itself pulling at her, urging her to understand the true nature of the balance. She had heard the whispers of the trees, the voices of the past, but now it was time to face the ancient stows who had known the land in its purest form and had seen the ebb and flow of its magic. We're getting closer, Joran said, his voice steady as he walked beside Elara. The balance is shifting. We can feel it. Arya, who had been walking ahead, turned to face them. I feel it too, she said. The land is restless. We are nearing the place where the heart of the darkness lies. The trial that awaits us will test everything. Elara nodded, her grip tightening around the crystal. I know, the heart of the darkness is not just a place, is a test of will, of strength, and of choice. The air around them grew thick with anticipation as they continued deeper into the grove. The shadows stretched longer, and the light seemed to flicker and fade in certain places, as though the land itself was fighting against the light. The trials of the ancients, the path narrowed as they reached the edge of a great chasm. On the other side, the land stretched out into a darkened abyss, a void where neither light nor shadow seemed to dominate. A feeling of deep unease settled over the group as they stood before the chasm. On the far side, a stone archway stood, ancient and worn by time. This is it, Elara whispered, her breath caught in her throat. The place where the balance was lost. Joran's hand instinctively went to his sword, but he said nothing. Arya, ever calm, stepped forward and spoke softly. The path forward is not a physical one. We must cross the chasm of the heart. Elara closed her eyes, reaching out with her senses, feeling the pulse of the land. She could feel the energy of the chasm, the swirling magic beneath her feet. The balance of the land was fragile, and it was here, in the heart of the darkness, that they would have to face their greatest challenge. The stone archway began to glow faintly, and the air around them grew still. The ancient energy of the grove stirred as a deep, resonant voice echoed from the chasm. Only those who understand both light and dark may pass. To restore balance, you must face what lies within you. What will you choose? The voice seemed to come from all around them, as if the land itself was speaking. Elara stepped forward, her heart steady. We will face the trial. We will embrace both the light and the dark, and we will restore the balance. The trial of will. The moment Elara spoke, the ground beneath them trembled. The chasm before them seemed to widen, and the archway glowed brighter, its energy intensifying. The air grew thick with a tangible presence, as if the very essence of the grove was testing them, examining their resolve. Suddenly, a flood of visions overwhelmed Elara. She saw the land as it had once been lush, vibrant, full of life. She saw the shadow creeping across the earth, devouring everything in its path, leaving only desolation in its wake. She saw herself, standing on the edge of the abyss, facing the shadow. But this time, she was not alone. Joran and Arya stood beside her, their hands raised in unity, their resolve unwavering. They would not let the darkness claim the land. But as the vision shifted, Elara saw something else herself, alone, standing in the shadows, her heart filled with doubt. The weight of the world pressed down on her, and she could feel the darkness calling her, urging her to embrace it. Would she be able to resist? Could she truly balance the light and the dark within her? The vision shattered, and Elara was left, standing on the edge of the chasm, her heart pounding. She felt the pressure of the trial weighing heavily on her. The light, the shadow, it was all part of her now. But would she be strong enough to wield both? Joran stepped forward, his voice steady. Elara, we're with you. You don't have to face this alone. Arya nodded. We are the light and the dark, together. We will restore the balance. Elara took a deep breath, her mind clearing. The choice was hers. She could either embrace the darkness, succumb to the doubts and fears that had plagued her, or she could choose to understand it, balance it with the light within her. She raised the crystal high, its glow intensifying, casting light and shadow across the chasm. The archway before her began to pulse with energy, the ancient magic of the grove awakening. The shadows around them receded, and for the first time, Elara felt the true balance of light and dark within her dot. The passage through the arch with the ground trembled one final time as the archway opened, revealing a path that led deeper into the heart of the darkness. But now, the darkness did not feel like a threat. It felt like an ally, a force to be understood and wielded. Elara stepped forward, Joran and Arya beside her. Together, they walked through the archway and into the unknown. The darkness was no longer something to fear, it was something to be embraced. The balance had been restored within them, and with it, they could face whatever came next. The heart of the grove had revealed its secret: to restore balance. They had to understand and accept both light and dark, not as opposing forces, but as complementary energies. And so, with the crystal glowing in her hand, Elara led her companions deeper into the heart of the land, ready to face the final challenge, the shadow that threatened to undo everything they had worked for. Chapter 7: The Heart of Darkness. The unseen force. The air was heavy with anticipation as Elara, Joran, and Arya walked deeper into the heart of the grove. The shadows were thick now, not oppressive, but enveloping, as if the land itself was guiding them toward an unknown fate. The crystal, still glowing faintly in Elara's hand, pulsed with an energy that resonated deep within her. She could feel if the land was calling, urging them to continue to move forward into the darkness. The path was narrow, the trees closing in around them. The light from the crystal flickered, casting long shadows on the twisted branches. For the first time since they had set foot in the grove, Elara felt truly uncertain. The air was thick with magic, and the closer they got to the center of the grove, the more she could sense an unseen force at work. It was like something ancient and powerful was watching them, waiting. The ground beneath their feet was soft and treacherous, the earth shifting as they moved, but Elara pressed on, her resolve steady. They had come this far, and they could not turn back now. The darkness reveals itself. As they approached a clearing, the shadows seemed to recede, and the crystal's light grew brighter, more intense. In the center of the clearing stood a massive stone altar, its surface covered with ancient runes, glowing with an otherworldly light. The air hummed with energy, as though the altar itself was alive with magic. Elara, Arya whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is it, the heart of the darkness. We must be careful. The land does not give up its secrets easily." Elara nodded, her gaze fixed on the altar. She could feel the pulse of the magic growing stronger with each step she took. As they drew closer, the ground beneath their feet seemed to vibrate with power, the air thick with tension. It was as if the very essence of the land was alive and waiting for them to unlock its secrets. As she reached the altar, Elara extended her hand, the crystal still glowing brightly in her grasp. The moment her fingers brushed the stone, a rush of energy surged through her, and a blinding light engulfed her vision. The Ancient One. When the light faded, Elara found herself standing in a vast, open space, an expanse of pure darkness. The air was still, and the only sound was the quiet hum of the crystal in her hand. But as she looked around, she saw something that took her breath away. A figure stood before her, tall and cloaked in shadow. Its face was hidden, but Elara could feel the weight of its presence, the power that emanated from it. "You've come," the figure said, its voice deep and resonant, echoing in the darkness. "You have come to face the heart of the shadow. But you are not the first." The figure stepped forward, and as it did, the shadows around it shifted, revealing glimpses of a time long past, images of a world before the darkness, a world where the land was whole and untouched. "You are the chosen one, Elara," the figure continued. "But you are not alone. The land has chosen others before you. They, too, came to face the shadow, but they failed." Elara felt a surge of fear, but quickly pushed it aside. "Why did they fail?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease. Creeping into her heart, the figure's voice softened, almost mournful. "They failed because they feared the shadow. They tried to destroy it, to erase it, but the shadow cannot be destroyed. It is not evil. It is simply the absence of light. It is a part of the balance." The truth of the shadow Elara's mind raced as the figure's words sank in. She had always thought of the shadow as something to be vanquished, something that needed to be destroyed. But now she realized that it was more complicated than that. The shadow was not just a force of destruction. It was a necessary part of the balance, just as the light was. The light and the shadow are both needed, Elara whispered, understanding dawning on her. They are two sides of the same coin. Without the shadow, the light cannot exist, and without the light, the shadow consumes everything. The figure nodded. "You are wiser than they were," it said. "The balance must be restored, but it cannot be done by force. It must be done through understanding, through acceptance. Only then will the shadow be contained. Only then will the balance be restored." Elara's heart swelled with understanding. The path forward was not one of destruction, but of acceptance. The shadow was not their enemy, it was a part of the world, just as the light was. They had to embrace it, not fight it. "I will restore the balance," Elara said, her voice filled with resolve. "I will embrace both the light and the shadow." The final challenge, the figure stepped back, its form blending into the darkness. "Then you must face the final challenge. You will walk the path of both light and shadow. Only then will you unlock the power to restore what has been lost." The ground beneath Elara shifted once again, and she found herself standing at the edge of the chasm. The crystal in her hand pulsed brightly, but the darkness before her seemed endless. "You must make your choice," the figure said, its voice now a distant echo. "Will you step into the light, or will you walk the shadowed path?" Elara took a deep breath. She had already made her choice. She would walk both paths. She would embrace the balance, and with it, restore the land. She stepped forward into the darkness. Chapter 8. The Path of Shadows, the Descent into the Abyss. Elara stepped forward into the darkness, the weight of her decision pressing on her chest. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the crystal in her hand. As she walked deeper into the shadow, she could feel the land shift around her, as though the earth itself was alive, watching her, waiting for her to understand. The darkness was not empty. It was full of whispers, faint voices carried by the wind, echoing from all directions. The crystal's light seemed to push back the shadows, casting long, distorted shapes on the ground. But the deeper she went, the more she realized that the light alone would not be enough to guide her. "Joran, Arya," Elara called, her voice barely a whisper. "Stay close." The path ahead was unclear, the ground shifting with each step. The shadows seemed to dance at the edges of her vision, pulling her toward them, tempting her to follow. She had made her choice, but now she felt the weight of that choice more than ever. The shadow was not just a force of darkness, it was something far older, something that had existed long before the light. She knew that the true test lay not in the path ahead, but in the choices she had to make. To restore the balance, she had to embrace both the light and the dark. But the darkness was a force of introspection, a mirror reflecting not just the world outside, but the world within. The shadow's voices, Elara ventured further. The air grew colder, and the whispers grew louder, more distinct. The voices called her name, murmuring words she could not understand, their tone beckoning, urging her to see what lay hidden in the shadows. Elara, the voice whispered, distant and haunting. You have come so far, but do you truly understand? The darkness, do you understand its power, its role in the balance of the world? Elara's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. I understand more than I did before, she replied. The darkness is not something to be feared. It is a part of the world. It is a part of me. The voice laughed softly, a sound that sent a chill down Elara's spine. You speak of balance, but balance is not something that can be achieved with words alone. The shadow tests those who seek it. You will face yourself, and only when you truly understand the darkness within you can you control it. The shadows around Elara seemed to shift, coalescing into dark shapes. Figures emerged from the mist, silhouettes that seemed familiar yet strange, as though they were reflections of herself, her fears, and her doubts. They moved toward her, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Face us, they said in unison. Face what lies hidden in the depths of your soul. The reflection of the self the figures circled Elara, their presence growing heavier with each passing moment. They were her, yet not her manifestations of her innermost fears, regrets, and doubts. The longer she stood there, the more they seemed to take shape, growing more defined. Elara's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the shadows pressing in on her, wrapping around her like a cold, suffocating blanket. But she knew she could not run from them. This was the trial of the shadow, the trial of self. You're afraid, one of the figures whispered, its voice a dark echo of her own. You fear that you are not strong enough to carry the burden of this power. You fear that the darkness will consume you. No, Elara whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. I am not afraid of you. I am not afraid of what I have to face. Another figure stepped forward, its form more defined than the others. It was her reflection in the truest sense. It smiled, a cold, knowing smile. You are afraid of the choices you've made. You are afraid that the light will abandon you, that you are not worthy of the balance. The shadow sees your doubt, and it will use it to tear you apart. Elara stepped back, her hands trembling. I am strong enough, she said, her voice gaining strength. I will not let the shadow control me. I will not be consumed by fear. The figure's smile faded. Then prove it. Embracing the darkness, the shadow figures lunged toward Elara. But this time, she was ready. She held the crystal high, its light flaring brighter, casting long shadows on the ground. The darkness retreated, but only for a moment. Elara could feel the pull of the shadows, trying to drag her down, trying to consume her doubts. But Elara closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and embraced the darkness. She no longer fought against it. Instead, she allowed herself to feel it, to understand it. The shadow was not an enemy, it was a part of her. It was her fear, her doubt, her pain, but it was also the strength that had allowed her to survive. The crystal glowed brighter, its light merging with the darkness, creating a perfect balance. The figures around her faded, their forms dissipating into the air as the shadow no longer had a hold on her. "You are ready," the voice whispered, now filled with approval. "You have faced the darkness within, and now you understand it. The balance is yours to restore." The final choices, the shadow figures vanished. Elara felt the weight of the darkness lifting. The path before her was clear, and she could feel the land's energy flowing around her. The balance between light and shadow now restored within her. But there was still one final choice to be made. The clearing before her was bathed in both light and shadow, the crystal glowing brightly in her hand. The land waited, holding its breath. Elara turned toward Joran and Arya, her heart full of resolve. She had embraced both the light and the dark within herself. Now she would restore the balance to the land. With the crystal raised high, she stepped forward into the center of the clearing, ready to make the final choice that would determine the fate of the grove and the future of the world. Chapter 9. The Restoration of Balance. The final choice. Elara stood at the heart of the clearing, the crystal glowing brightly in her hands, casting both light and shadow across the land. The wind had stopped, and the world around her seemed to hold its breath. She could feel the weight of the land's magic pulsing through her, a force both powerful and delicate, like a living entity waiting for the right moment to act. She had embraced the darkness and the light within herself. Now it was time to make the final decision. Would the land be restored, or would it be consumed by the shadow? The voices of the past echoed in her mind, the whispers of the trees, the guidance of the ancient figure who had spoken to her. She understood now that the shadow was not the enemy. It was a force of the world, just as light was. The key to restoring the balance was not defeating the shadow, but learning to coexist with it, to embrace it without letting it consume everything. The crystal in her hand pulsed with a soft light, as though it too understood the gravity of the moment. She felt the land respond to her, the earth beneath her feet humming with energy. The path forward was clear. She had to release the crystal's energy, to let it merge with both light and shadow, and restore the harmony that had been broken. But there was a risk. The crystal's power was immense, and if used incorrectly, it could tip the balance forever, plunging the world into darkness. But Elara had no choice. She had to trust herself, trust in the journey she had taken, and in the knowledge she had gained. The merging of light and shadow. Elara closed her eyes and took a deep breath, grounding herself in the earth, feeling the pulse of the crystal, the beating heart of the land. The shadows, though ever present, no longer felt like a threat. They were a part of her, a part of the land. The light, too, was not without its imperfections. Together they formed the balance. She raised the crystal high, feeling its energy surge through her, through the land. The light intensified, flooding the clearing with a brilliance so pure that it was almost blinding. But as the light grew, the shadows did not retreat. Instead, they danced with the light, intertwining, merging, forming a perfect balance. The crystal's glow spread across the land, touching every tree, every leaf, every stone, as the earth itself seemed to come alive with the energy of the restored balance. The land, which had once been choked by darkness, was now filled with vibrancy. With the harmony of both forces working together, Elara felt the pulse of the land align with her own heartbeat. The shadow was no longer an enemy. It was a part of the world, a force that, when understood and embraced, could be controlled. The awakening of the land as the light and shadow merged. The world around Elara seemed to awaken. The trees stood taller, their branches reaching toward the sky, their leaves shimmering with the energy of the restored balance. The rivers flowed with renewed strength, their waters sparkling in the light. The ground beneath her feet felt solid, but alive, as though the very earth was breathing again. The crystal, now dimming, had fulfilled its purpose. Its energy had merged with the land's magic, restoring the balance. Elara lowered her hand, the crystal now a soft glow in her palm. She turned to Joran and Arya, her heart full of gratitude and relief. They had done it. Together, they had restored what was broken. The land had been healed, the shadow contained, and the light had found its rightful place. "We did it," Elara said, her voice filled with awe. Joren smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "We did it together. We embraced both light and shadow. And now the balance is restored." Arya nodded, her expression calm and serene. "The land will remember this. It will flourish once more." The return of pieces. Elara looked around. She could feel the weight of the journey lift from her shoulders. The shadow, though still present, no longer threatened the land. It had been understood, and in understanding, it had been contained. The light, too, had found its place, no longer overpowering the world, but instead working in harmony with the darkness. The village, far in the distance, would soon feel the effects of the restoration. The land would provide for them once more, and the people would be able to live in peace. The fog that had once hung heavy over the village would fade, replaced by the clarity of the world restored. But Elara knew that the journey was not truly over. The balance between light and shadow was always fragile, always shifting. The key was understanding, remembering, and embracing both forces. The land would continue to grow, evolve, and change, and Elara, along with Joran and Arya, would be its guardians, its keepers. A new beginning as the sun began to set. Casting long shadows across the grove, Elara felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had walked the path of light and shadow, faced the darkness within herself, and restored the balance to the land. But the journey was far from over. There were still many stories to be written, many challenges to face. The shadow, though contained, would always be a part of the world. The light, too, would continue to evolve. With the crystal in her hand, Elara turned toward the horizon, her heart full of hope. The land had been healed, but the world would always be in flux, always shifting between light and dark, and it was. In that balance that life would continue, together. They would move forward guided by the lessons of the past, but ready for whatever the future held. Chapter 1. A New Dawn. The calm after the storm. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, its light spilling across the land in gentle waves. The shadows of the past had faded, and with it the land began to breathe again. Elara stood at the edge of the grove, her gaze fixed on the vast expanse before her. The world was quiet, now peaceful, almost serene. The crystal that had guided them through their journey was now dim, its power used, its purpose fulfilled. But the land was not without its scars. Though the shadow had been contained, Elara knew that the balance was still delicate. The forces of light and dark would always be at odds, always shifting, forever intertwined. The key to maintaining peace was not in the absence of shadow, but in understanding its place within the world. "We've done it," Joran said, his voice steady but filled with awe. as he looked at the grove. "The land is healing." Arya, standing beside him, nodded. "The darkness may be contained, but it's still here. It will always be a part of the land." Elara turned to face her companions. They had been through so much together, and now they were standing at the threshold of a new beginning. They had restored the balance, but what lay ahead was unknown. "We've done more than just restore balance," Elara said softly, her voice filled with a sense of fulfillment. "We've understood the shadow. We've learned to accept it, not as an enemy, but as a part of the world. And in doing so, we've found peace." Joran looked out at the land, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "The land has always been a reflection of us. We've learnt to live in harmony with it, and now the world is in balance." Arya stepped forward, her eyes bright with the light of newfound knowledge. "The shadow will always be there, but we are ready for it. We know that the true strength lies in embracing both light and dark. Only then can we maintain peace." The return to the village with the grove behind them, Elara and her companions made their way back to the village. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but they had succeeded. The village, once on the brink of destruction, would now thrive once more. The land had been healed, and with it the hope of a better future. As they entered the village, the people gathered around them, their faces filled with curiosity and gratitude. They had heard of the trials, of the darkness that had threatened their world, but they had never known the full extent of what Elara and her companions had faced. Stepped forward, the villagers parting to allow her through. She looked around at their faces, her family, her friends. They were safe now, but they had learned just as much as she had. The future was no longer uncertain. The shadow had been contained, but they all knew that it was not the end. It was only the beginning. The village elder, an old woman with wisdom in her eyes, approached Elara. "You've done what many thought impossible," she said, her voice filled with reverence. "You've restored the balance. The land is in your debt." Elara smiled softly, bowing her head. "The land has always been in our debt. We only had to listen." The elder nodded. "The people will rejoice, but there will be challenges ahead. The balance is delicate, and we must never forget the lessons of the past." Ilira's heart swelled with pride as she looked out over the village. The journey had been long, but it had brought them to this moment, this peaceful, quiet moment. Of restoration, the future awaits. The day turned to night. Elara sat by the fire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows across her face. Joran and Arya sat beside her, the three of them reflecting on all they had been through. The world was changing, but for the first time in a long while, Elara felt at peace. "We've come a long way," Joran said, his voice soft as he gazed into the fire. "The land has healed, but we've learned something far more important. The balance is not something we can control. It's something we must understand." Elara nodded, her eyes distant. "We've faced the darkness, but in the end, we found that it wasn't the shadow we had to fear. It was the fear of the shadow itself. Understanding it, accepting it, that's what gave us the strength to restore the balance." Arya smiled, her expression serene. "The light and shadow are both necessary. One cannot exist without the other. And now we can live in harmony with both." Elara turned her gaze toward the village, where the people were gathered, celebrating their newfound peace. The village was thriving, the air filled with laughter and song. The land was healing, and the balance had been restored. But Elara knew that the journey was far from over. The world was always shifting, always evolving. The balance would need to be maintained, and she, along with Joran and Arya, would be its guardians. As the moon rose high in the sky, Elara felt a sense of calm settle over her. The future was uncertain, but for the first time she felt ready. For whatever lay ahead, the shadow would always be a part of the world, but it would no longer be something to fear. It would be something to understand, and together they would keep the balance.